I wish it wasn't so, but the best things that they will ever learn, the lessons that will stick with them and that they'll really grow from, are going to come from the pain in their lives, their hurts and their disappointments. And you, as their mom or as their dad, you can be such an amazing catalyst of growth for them while walking beside them and with them when they're hurt and disappointed. Hey, my name is Sarah Short, and I'm a busy mom of 5 kids, and after almost 2 decades of parenting, I'm here to share with you everything I've learned from my triumphs and successes and from my biggest mistakes. Think of me as the mom who's been where you are, remembers how hard, hilarious, and exhausting your days are, and wants to help you navigate your days as a mom with courage and intention, all while fostering amazing relationships with your kids and a home life you love. My Nana once told me, there's no way but through. Turns out she was right, in life and in motherhood. So throw in some headphones and come laugh and cry with me as we talk about all things mom. This is the No Way But Through podcast. Hey y'all, so glad to be back with you guys again today on the No Way But Through podcast. I love that y'all show up here week after week and that we get to hang out and talk over on Instagram all week. And just a reminder that if you listen to this podcast regularly and you haven't left a review for me yet over on Apple Podcasts, it would just be so awesome if you could do that for me. Leaving a review really helps other moms find this podcast and be able to be encouraged by it as well. On today's episode, we're going to talk about our kids' hurts and disappointments. Hurt and disappointment come for all of us. Even our smallest kids are going to experience disappointment and hurt. I remember my mom telling me about one of her earliest memories as a child. Her parents were divorced and she was maybe 5 years old, and she would wait out on the front stoop of their townhouse in downtown Baltimore, where she lived with her mom and her grandparents. She would sit there and anxiously await because her dad was coming to get her and take her out to get a treat. And she would sit on the front stoop waiting for him, and many times he never arrived. And I remember her telling me that sometimes he would show up, but he would be staggering drunk and coming from the bar where he had just gambled away all of their family's money. She was 5, and she remembered. Whenever she would tell me this story, which she recounted to me multiple times as I was growing up and into my adult years, whenever she would talk about this, she would just be overcome with this deep sadness about how hard that was. She remained close with her father until he died in the early 90s, and she would often talk about special memories they shared together over the years. And I have very, very vivid memories of my own of going and visiting Pop-Pop in his townhouse in Baltimore in the 80s when we were on our way from West Virginia to Ocean City, Maryland for our summer vacation. I loved visiting with Pop-Pop. I loved Pop-Pop. Amidst all of the love that we felt for him, and I know my mom felt for him too up until he died, she had faced great disappointment and hurt from him as a younger child. I wanted to share this story with you as we're starting out because I know so many of you have little tiny ones, and they're soon going to be approaching, if they aren't already, the ages where they're going to be remembering things. While I was preparing for this podcast, I was thinking about all the ways that my kids have really been hurt and experienced disappointment over the years. I can think of dozens of things that in the grand scheme of things didn't seem like a big deal, but were such a big deal to them. I forgot to buy ice cream. Dad's flight got canceled and he wasn't going to make it home that night from a business trip for their baseball game. They didn't get put in the same class as one of their friends. A neighborhood kid called them a name. And there are many things I can think of that felt like they were really a big deal, and were. They didn't make the team they tried out for. A breakup. A friend ghosted them. They got left out of a friend group. They didn't get invited to the party. Social media will exacerbate this in their teen years because while, as I mentioned in episode 15, social media can be used for so much good, and we teach our kids that, but it can also be used as a weapon to hurt and bully and betray and cause deep, deep wounds. So what do we do when our kids are hurt? What do we do when they're disappointed? I've been a mom now for 20 years, as y'all know, and so I have lived through a lot of disappointment that my kids have felt. I am naturally an empath. I'm an Enneagram 2, if you are into any of that. I take on the feelings of the people around me, sometimes in healthy ways, but sometimes in very unhealthy ways. I have had to do some really hard work as a mom in this area because I have 5 children and I don't have the capacity, nor did God build me with the capacity to take on all of the hurts of my kids. I cannot take on all of them as if they are my own. During a particularly difficult season for one of my boys, I reached out to a mom who is 15 years or so ahead of me in motherhood, and I was sharing with her what my son was experiencing and going through. And she told me something that was incredibly helpful for me as a mom, and so I want to share this with you first. She told me that she had come to realize that she needed to see her kids' lives like she was watching a movie, especially as they got into their older kid and teen years. She went on to tell me that she had been told this by one of her doctors and that it was so important for her to recognize that, let's say, one of her kids was going through a breakup, that she wasn't going through a breakup. Her marriage was fine, but one of her kids was feeling hurt and rejection inside a breakup, and that she needed to be able to look on them with compassion and empathy, but then also be able to help them because it wasn't happening to her. So she wasn't completely debilitated in sorrow and pain, but she was the mom in the situation, and she needed to be able to point her child in the right direction. To be a source of help and discernment and encouragement, that can only really happen if you aren't both totally immersed inside the situation and feeling all of the same things. This was so incredibly helpful to me and just very powerful advice. And ever since I've heard that, I've been able to really employ the wisdom inside of it and do this hard work of separating my own emotions and feelings from what my kids are feeling. It's really important that we not bring into parenting and into every single situation with our kids our own personal hurts that we're carrying from our own childhood and our own experiences. We can serve our kids really well and help them best if we're able to see their situations for what they are in their lives. And in that, I've been able to be a much better mother to them, and I've been able to help them so much more. Y'all know I would never sit here and tell you to not feel any of the pain that your kids are feeling. I mean, we couldn't do that if we tried, right? The pain in my kids' lives, the pain that they've experienced, the rejections that they feel and have felt, from the really big things to the things that to me seem much smaller and less significant, I cannot help but feel a sting in my own heart. They are my kids. I want to protect them, and I want to be angry for and on behalf of them. But here's the thing. We have so much opportunity when our kids are hurt and disappointed. So much opportunity. I wish it wasn't so. But the best things that they will ever learn, the lessons that will stick with them and that they'll really grow from, are going to come from the pain in their lives, their hurts and their disappointments. And you, as their mom or as their dad, you can be such an amazing catalyst of growth for them while walking beside them and with them when they're hurt and disappointed. So today, what I want to share with you are 5 opportunities that you have as a parent when your child is hurt or disappointed. There is so much good that can come out of their pain. Y'all, there is. I am guessing if you're sitting here listening to this, that you can think about good in your own life, good that's come out of some of your most painful experiences. Like I said earlier, I wish it wasn't so. I wish it wasn't pain that taught us the most, but y'all, it is. It is a powerful tool that can teach us and can teach our kids so much. So what I want to do today is help you see these things, what opportunities you have when your kids are experiencing any kind of pain or disappointment from something maybe really minor, like mom forgot to buy ice cream and you look over and they're crying on the sofa, to the things that absolutely break their hearts. So here they are, 5 opportunities you have when your kids are feeling hurt or disappointment. Number 1, you get to model for them what it looks like to comfort someone else. There are going to be a lot of opportunities that your kids are going to have to comfort a friend, one of their siblings, and then as life marches on with high school and their college friends and in their working lives, and then as they get married and have their own kids, they're going to have a lot of opportunities to comfort someone else who is experiencing pain and disappointment. And one of the privileges that we get as parents is to model for our kids what it looks like to really comfort someone when they're hurt. And for them to then be able to say, gosh, this is how mom comforted me. This is how dad comforted me. And this made me feel better. And so it's such an opportunity for them to begin to internalize and process that and become good friends and good comforters to others. One of the things that's really important in this is that when someone's going through something hard, it's important to acknowledge their feelings and validate them, right? Most of the time, what someone is feeling is very valid. There are reasons, whether they're good or bad reasons. There are reasons that they're feeling the way that they're feeling. And so we get to model for them what it looks like to say, I understand how you're feeling. I understand that you're sad, and I see that. And I am so sad that you're sad, right? Like what it looks like for them to enter into being a good comforter and being a good friend by validating and acknowledging someone's feelings. But then to be a catalyst of helping them move forward by pointing them to the truth in God's word, by pointing them to what's true about the situation that maybe they're not seeing, and giving that other person another perspective. They will grow in this over time and get better at this, but even as they're walking through high school, they can be these kinds of friends. They can be this kind of friend when they're 7 or 8. You know, my kids have gotten cut from sports teams. We've had kids who've gotten cut from sports, and it is incredibly painful. It's just such a hard thing. And you guys with little ones, you probably haven't walked through that yet with your own kids, but you can probably remember back to a time when you dealt with this yourself or you faced something similar. One of my sons recently had one of his best friends not make a team that he made. And because we work on this a ton and talk about what it means to comfort someone else, he was able to employ what he had learned to comfort his friend, how to be a good friend to his friend that didn't make the team that he made. It was so important to my son to acknowledge his friend's sadness and disappointment, and yet to encourage him and build him up. And you know, for my son, it's telling him he's the GOAT and he's so proud of him, and it's so lame that he didn't make the team, but just to let him know that he was on his side and for him. And we've talked about this and trained him to do this, because we've practiced and taught this to him for many years. He was able to tell his friend that he is for him and that he is sad for him when he is sad, and that not making this team didn't change any of the way he felt about him, and that he still thinks he's the GOAT. You have an amazing opportunity every time your kids are hurt or disappointed to model for them what it looks like to comfort someone else and to be a good friend that's able to validate and acknowledge someone else's hurt and pain and not sweep it under the rug, but then to build them up with words and truth and help them to move forward. Number 2, you can help them see how not to treat people. You know, I have both kinds of kids. Kids that share pretty much everything. Well, not everything. I can tell you, no teenager shares everything, but pretty much share almost everything in their lives with me or with Jason. And then I have some kids that are much more private, and they've always been this way since they were tiny. Maybe you can think about your kids right now, even with your little toddlers or preschoolers, and think, oh yeah, this one shares everything and this one's more private. Like, you might even be able to identify that now. My kids that share more with us will oftentimes recount to us the things and the stories that are going on within their friend groups, within their lives, or even when they were little, they would get in the car after school and just tell us and unload to us all the stuff that happened from the day, what happened at lunch, stuff that went down on the playground, or interactions with their classmates and friends inside the classroom. They would just unload all of it onto us. And one of the things that we can really do as moms is listen to the situations and the different scenarios that our kids find themselves in. And not only that they find themselves in, but the ones that they recount to you that their friends are in. And a lot of times, someone's not going to handle something inside those situations right. Either their friend's not going to handle something right or well, or our kid is not going to handle something well. And so we have a lot of opportunity when other kids or when our own kid doesn't do something well to say, hey, this is something that can be really hurtful. If you do this way, this can be really hurtful to somebody else when you say or do this. It can really make them feel insecure, or it could hurt their feelings, or it's unkind. And this is not the way that God would want us to treat other people. This is never more valuable, or you never really have a better opportunity than when your kids are feeling a hurt or a disappointment or a rejection from somebody else. When your kids are hurt by someone, this is an incredible opportunity for you to gently say to them, see how this has made you feel? See how hard this is? This is a great opportunity for you to learn right now that this isn't a great way to treat others. When you get in a situation like this and you're on the other side, maybe think about how this has made you feel, and you don't want other people to feel this way that you're feeling right now, right? And so if there's any way to help it, if there's any way that you can avoid doing it this way, then this might really help minimize the hurt and pain that somebody else is feeling. So it's just a conversation, right? It's just you pointing out what you want them to see and what you want them to know. And that their pain, in their own pain and in their own hurt, that the way they're being treated, this is just not a great way to do things, right? And that when they want to act this way towards somebody else, to maybe think about how it made them feel. Pain is an incredible tool for teaching our kids empathy. Because, sometimes our kids' perceptions on things aren't accurate, right? One of my sons was on a sports team once, and there were some boys on that team that were absolutely awful to him. I actually wouldn't say that with such certainty if I hadn't witnessed it myself, because, sometimes our kids' perceptions, they're not accurate. I remember standing around after one of his games and watching one of the boys on this team just ripping my son to shreds in front of a group of other boys. And he didn't realize that I was in earshot of him. And I remember thinking that what I wanted to do was go over and just take that kid out. We're moms. That's how we feel, right? He was just being so mean to my son. And I think mostly behind the scenes in these undercutting, passive-aggressive ways. But I saw it like in front of me in that moment. But on the surface, day in and day out, he would act like he was my son's friend. And my son would talk to us and say things like, I'm just not really sure he's my friend. And, Sarah, I kind of operate with wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt all the time. And there are times when that serves me really, really well, but there are times when that bites me in the ass. But I remember wanting to give this kid the benefit of the doubt until that day when I saw it for myself. My son was feeling hurt and rejection, and he couldn't quite pinpoint it, and he saw things that were happening. And I remember saying to him, hey, buddy, this is an example of the kind of friend you don't want to be. Like, see how hurtful his actions are towards you, the way he speaks about you and is treating you. I understand your heart and I hate it for you, but one of the things I want you to really take from this is to not be that kind of person. Be someone who lifts up your friends behind their backs. Be the kind of friend that your friends know that when they're not in the room, when their name is brought up, it isn't being slandered, but that you are for them and you will always talk about them with kindness. Because see how this is making you feel? See how hard this is? This is an example of not being a good friend, and I want you to grow into being a really good friend. And so that was just a really powerful teaching opportunity, right? And I know that my son got it and understood that in the moment in the way that he maybe wouldn't have if he hadn't experienced that kind of treatment from someone he thought was his friend. It really gave him clear eyes to be able to see what gossip and slander and unkindness and unfair treatment does to someone's heart and to their soul. Did he always get this perfectly going forward? Of course not. But it was such a powerful moment in teaching him what it looks like to not be a good friend and how not to treat someone. Number 3. You get to help them develop strength and resilience. Hurt in our kids' lives helps them develop strength and resilience. It just does. I've been alive almost 50 years, and I remember hurt from my very first memories, and I still experience hurt now. Hurt and disappointment and pain, especially inside relationships, it's always going to be there. So you have an amazing opportunity to begin to train them to be resilient when pain comes into their lives. What does it look like to feel pain, to feel disappointment, but then move forward? It can be so hard for our kids to have appropriate perspective on situations, right? To understand that something is not always going to be this way, or that circumstances will change, and the way they're feeling in any particular moment is not how they're always going to feel. I remember saying to one of my kids during a really hard time, it isn't always going to hurt this much. It isn't always going to feel this way. I promise that it's going to get better. Your heart is going to start to feel better. And you know what? It did. But the pain and the hurt that our kids experience is doing really good work in them and helping them build muscles to be able to deal with future hurt and pain. The things that they're learning even now with like your little ones and somebody pushing them down on the playground and they're coming home and telling you about it, you can begin to help train them to see the situation for what it is and process it and deal with it in a healthy way so that they can then be better prepared to handle the situation the next time it comes along. They will learn and grow in resilience as they go through difficult and painful situations throughout their childhood. And I'm telling you, they're going to be able to pull from what they've learned early on when their teenage years hit and when they're really going to need it. If you do this intentional teaching with them now, helping them process their pain in a healthy way and grasping onto these opportunities in their little years that you have as their parents, as their mom, particularly when they come to you with hurt and disappointment and you help them walk through a situation that's really hard for them. You know, I will tell you from my own life that I wish I didn't need resilience. And I wish I didn't need the pain that I experienced as a child to teach me that resilience. I'm sure some of you can relate to that too. But what a gift to now be able to take all that I learned and all of my own pain and the lessons that I learned from it and the resilience that was built inside of me and train my kids to do this well, to train and help them to become resilient individuals, resilient kids that will grow into resilient adults that will be able to face their own hurts and pain and move forward in healthy ways. I want to insert this here too because I think this is so important. I am a huge fan and will always be the biggest fan of counseling. If you think one of your kids is going through a hard time, either from hurt or pain they're experiencing from school, friends, or in your family from anything at all, I want you to hear me say that I strongly encourage you to reach out and get counseling for them. I know that can feel maybe overwhelming or scary, or do I really want my child talking to somebody else and I'm not in the room and what's going to come out in there? But y'all, I can tell you from my own experience, my own counseling as a child, and then with many years of counseling as an adult, and with experiences we've had with our own children with counseling, I cannot recommend it enough. There is so much good that can be done with a good counselor, so much more good that can be done there than can be done by listening to my podcast or anybody else's podcast for that matter. I just want to encourage you that counseling is a tool available to you and to not be afraid to use it. Number 4. You can teach them that most friendships are for seasons. Most of the pain that my kids have experienced, or the hurts, from the minor hurts to the more significant things, they've come from friendships. As I've talked with my girlfriends over the years, we've sat and talked about friendships with their teenage girls, their teenage boys, or even with our younger kids. There is a lot of hurt and pain that can come from inside friendship. Y'all, we know this, right? We experience that now as adults, and sometimes friendships end. Sometimes we get no explanation, and I hate this. A friend actually said to me the other day, "Man, I just wish that some friendships weren't for seasons." Gosh, I get this. But the truth of the matter is that there are going to be many friendships. I would even say most of our friendships in life are only going to be for a season. College friends, or friends that you were friends with when you first got married, and then friends that you had when your kids were really little. Life just changes and people move on and you move on. And sometimes we get no explanation, and sometimes we can clearly see why. But this concept is something that, especially as kids get into their middle and high school years, they can understand this. I remember saying to one of my teenagers, "Listen, you're getting ready to graduate soon, and your friendships are going to change. You are going to make new friends in this next season of your life and college, and some of the people that were your friends in high school are not going to be your friends anymore. And that's okay. But I know that it can feel like everything that's happening right now, right here in these relationships in high school, it feels so big and it feels so important. In a lot of ways, it is, because we are called to love the people well that God puts in our lives right in front of us today. But it's going to change soon for you. You will probably have some friends, some of your guy friends that you stick with after high school, and you're going to maybe be friends with them long term, and that is awesome. But most of the friendships that we have in life shift and change. And then I gave him examples in my own life that he's been able to see play out too. Walking them through this with intentionality and talking to them about this can help them to not minimize the hurt and the pain that they feel, but give them perspective about it. Ultimately, we need relationships to be for seasons, right? Imagine if you were told you could only have the friends you made in high school for the rest of your life because you've got a full plate and that's it. You need to stick with them forever. That makes no sense, right? Seasons change and people change, and sometimes friendships end because there's unhealthy stuff there or hurt and pain there, and sometimes they end simply because of circumstances. But the truth of the matter is that most relationships are for seasons. And so even if one of your little ones in kindergarten or first grade, one of their friends moves away, which is what we had, and our kid is sad and hurt about it, this is an opportunity for you to begin to plant this seed of truth in them. And then you will be able to go back to it again and again and again as you teach them and as they continue to learn this lesson all the way up through becoming adults. Number 5. And most importantly, you get to point them to God. This is the very best and most important thing that I want to tell you today about walking through hurt and disappointment with your kids. And that is that they are never alone and they are never not understood, because the God who made them and loves them will never leave them. And they are never, even for 1 second, alone in their hurt and disappointment or rejection, because God will never leave them. But maybe even more important than that, maybe even more powerful than that He will never leave them, is that He knows exactly how they feel. Jesus was left alone by His friends. He was betrayed and rejected by people that were His friends. He knows what it's like to be mocked and shamed. And even on the night that was the hardest night of His earthly life, the night before He would be crucified, He asked His friends to come be with Him, and they fell asleep. He knows what it's like to be rejected, and God knows what it's like to be in pain and to be hurt, and your kids hurt, whatever it is the opportunity where you get to point them to the gospel and say, Jesus willingly was hurt, willingly put Himself in the place of being treated badly, and He did all of this for you. On the other side of His pain and rejection and the hurt that He felt from His enemies and from His friends, on the other side of that cross was you. He would get you. It is so important that we be able to validate our kids' feelings and that we're able to come alongside them in their hurts and their disappointments. But it is not insensitive. It is not lacking awareness or ever too early to stop and tell them what is true about them and about God. They need it. They need to know it. Because while it might not feel like a solution or like immediate comfort to an acute situation they're facing, this truth, if it takes root and anchors their lives and hearts to God, then as they face more and more hurt and disappointments throughout their life, as life goes on, they will be able to return to that truth over and over and over again. And it will be a comfort. It will be a balm. And it will be this unshakable truth that is so foundational in their lives that when hurt and pain come, they won't be in despair. They will not feel alone. And if they do, they will have inside of them the truth that they need to help them move forward. So that's it for today. Those are just 5 opportunities of many that you have as a mom, as a parent, when your kids are hurt or disappointed. 1, you get to model for them what it looks like to comfort someone else. 2, you can help them see how not to treat people. Number 3, you get to help them develop in strength and resilience. Number 4, you can teach them that most friendships are for seasons. And number 5, and most importantly, you get to point them to God. I really want you to be able to see these opportunities now while you're really young moms, and see that you're going to have opportunities like this starting now and all the way up through. And if you begin to see their hurt and their pain and their disappointments as opportunities for you as a mom to teach them and love them and guide them and model for them what it looks like to do this well, then you are equipping them with something so important and so valuable that will serve them well for the rest of their lives. We all want to protect our kids from any kind of hurt, right? From not making the team or getting rejected or left out or pushed down on the playground or even the deeper stuff of family pain, death, or divorce. And if we could protect them from it, we would, right? But then they'd miss out on all of the good and all of the lessons that pain has to teach us, and how God never wastes any of it, but uses it to mold them into incredible people who know how to love others well and be empathetic and kind. And you, as their mom, you get to be part of teaching them that. We're the luckiest, aren't we? That's it for today. See y'all next time. You've just listened to another episode of the No Way But Through podcast. If you want to connect with other like-minded moms and join our growing online community, head on over to Instagram and follow along with us at No Way But Through. You can always reach me over there throughout the week. And if you'd like to financially support this podcast, there's a link at the bottom of every episode where you can do just that.